Big news out of Barcelona this week. An anti-tourism protest was held over the weekend in which marchers sprayed tourists with water guns. It's all over the international news. Oh my! Well, about that. One of my least favorite trends online is the proliferation of reaction videos. Content creators do it a lot though, so it must be effective. Find the dumbest person you can on TikTok, then give a rebuttal of whatever inane drivel they've published, as long as it's popular. In a way, you're just riding on the coattails of other people's viral videos. If the topic was popular for them, maybe your reaction can be similarly popular, and you can earn a bit of money from the YouTube ads. But it's hardly worth it, in my opinion, if you have to spend your life responding to people who are objectively stupid. Well, that's how I feel about reporting on every anti-tourism thing that happens here in Barcelona. So, here's the deal. Spanish people protest a lot. Some are annoyed by tourism in their cities, but most would never think to spend their Saturday afternoon at a protest about it. Seeing someone on the street, looking at them for 2 seconds, making a judgment about who they probably are, and deciding to harass them based on that judgment is dumb. And of course, anyone who's bothered by the outsized impact of tourism on the Spanish economy is welcome to start a business that will add a few billion euros to the GDP some other way. If you'd like, head over to the blog at expatmadrid.com and check out some of my other articles about big protests here in town. This was not even a big protest, it was a small protest. We have had some big ones for Catalan independence, some riots about a rapper who was thrown in jail for assaulting a reporter, and occasionally there are taxi strikes that shut down main streets. For now, though, let's talk about some real news. Hey everybody, it's Daniel, and welcome back to Spain to Go, the best podcast in the entire multiverse for all things Spain. This is episode 81, Weed Clubs, Guns, and Anti-Tourism Protests in Barcelona. We've already dealt with the anti-tourism protests. I don't have much more to say about it. So let's talk about the weed clubs. A couple of years ago, I published episode 35 of this podcast, in which I talked about the situation of cannabis in Barcelona and the city's many weed clubs. The short version of the story is that they exist in a sort of legal gray area, allowing members to obtain cannabis inside the clubs. Keyword, obtain. Officially, the clubs are only supposed to distribute small amounts, and selling weed or promoting its use is prohibited. Smoking in public is also illegal according to Spanish law, as is transporting large amounts, but as far as I can tell, smoking marijuana in the privacy of your own home is okay. As usual, this is not legal advice. Ask a lawyer if you've got questions, because I heard it on Daniel's podcast is not going to hold up in court. Anyway, back to Barcelona's weed clubs. Because a couple of years ago, when I wrote about it, I reported that Barcelona's City Hall was thinking about getting rid of the weed clubs. And today I saw that they're finally getting serious. Allegedly, they've ordered 30 local weed clubs to close. The clubs have 10 days to appeal, and we'll see what happens in the courts. Police have localized and identified 212 weed clubs in Barcelona, and the official objective is to close all of them. Barcelona isn't Amsterdam, and apparently the local government doesn't want to add cannabis tourism to its long list of problems. All this is part of the new city government's plan to combat antisocial behavior, incivismo, they call it around here, with crackdowns on drugs, graffiti, and noise in the streets at night. So, as usual, I have my doubts about this kind of thing. Will closing weed clubs just create a bigger market for street dealers? Will the government be doing something about hard drugs also, which seem to be popular? Only time will tell, and I should mention that this is only happening in Barcelona. Weed clubs in other parts of Spain are presumably safe, for now. Meanwhile, La Vanguardia newspaper reports that police are confiscating assault rifles up here like never before. The mafias involved in growing and importing drugs are also finding themselves to be targets for robberies, and they're arming themselves for self-defense. Black market Kalashnikovs and other types of machine guns are brought into Catalonia from Eastern Europe and increasingly Africa. The police have no real idea about the scope of the problem because drug traffickers are unlikely to file a report if they've been robbed. But it's there. Of course, Spain isn't the US, and you can't just legally buy guns for self-defense. There are strict licensing laws and very limited reasons why owning a gun would be permitted at all, working in private security, hunting, and sport mainly. But that doesn't stop criminals from owning them. On the recent Night of St. John, in fact, there was a multiple homicide out near Girona in which a guy known to be involved in the drug trade shot up several members of a rival clan after an argument. The gun he used was an AK-47. He dropped it while fleeing the scene. But let's get back to the marijuana issue. What is the future of weed in Barcelona? In another article, El País says that cannabis tourism isn't legal anyway, at least in theory. The law states that clubs can't sell weed to new members who just walk in. There should be a mandatory 15-day waiting period for new members of weed clubs to access the dispensary. In practice, I'm pretty sure this doesn't happen. If you walk up and down the Rambla, you can find guys who will take you to a weed club right then and there, make you a member, and you can buy weed. The journalist for El País writes that he managed to gain access to a cannabis club with the promise not to reveal its exact location. Kinda weird considering that you can find literally dozens of clubs on Google Maps. They're not exactly top secret. He also doesn't mention whether or not he obtained any weed while he was there. Anyway, and always in the interest of journalism, I used to go to a weed club myself down in Barceloneta. They were allowing people to obtain the stuff about a block from my old house, in fact, and at least at that time, there was nothing about a 15-day waiting period. I would go during the pandemic, and a lot of times the smoking area would be closed or open or socially distanced, depending on the shifting restrictions about indoor gatherings in those days. After a while, Morena and I moved to another neighborhood, and I seem to have lost interest in getting high. I'm not even sure what happened. One day I ran out of weed and didn't feel like making the 20-minute walk down to obtain some more. That was it. It's weird, but I was never a serious lifestyle stoner or anything. I'd never been tempted to buy drugs on a street corner or do anything harder. But I'm sure I'm not the only person out there who's more likely to do these things if they're widely available and semi-legal. In fact, I went to the weed club the first time because a friend suggested it and made it seem pretty normal. What was I going to do? Be all straight-laced and boring about it? No, I'm sorry, my body is a temple. Bleh. Anyway, as you can tell, I don't really have strong opinions about the wacky tobacco one way or another. These days, in the US, it seems like being high all the time is pretty mainstream. Is this the big win for freedom that your local potheads were promising back in the 90s? I don't know. The word freedom is notoriously ambiguous and can be used to advocate for all sorts of things. I also seem to remember a fair amount of stoner wisdom going around back in the day, like the fact that smoking weed has absolutely no negative side effects and may actually make you a better driver. Reefer madness was nothing more than a myth from the 50s, so smoke up, dog. Okay, well, I guess I believed all that when I was 15. Not that a lot of people were really offering me drugs back in those days. Now it seems like we probably have more information, and, oops, looks like smoking weed can cause psychosis, for example. The science is still unsure about marijuana's effects on drivers, and of course, another thing the pandemic did was point out how the average person has no idea how science works. But I digress. Anyway, that's the big news of the day. Anti-tourism protesters buy squirt guns. a local crackdown on weed clubs, and the proliferation of assault rifles. I'll keep you posted about any major updates. Hope you have a great day wherever you are. That's about all I've got for today. You can find more of this podcast wherever podcasts are available. I'm on Spotify, I'm on Apple Podcasts, I'm on YouTube. Look for Learn Spanish with Daniel. Recently on that channel, Learn Spanish with Daniel, which is, now that I think of it, not very well named, I finished my videos about the route of Don Quixote. If you were around a few weeks ago, or maybe about 2 months ago, you know that I published an episode about the route of Don Quixote down in La Mancha. I did it by bicycle. It was great. Go to biketourinspain.com for all the details on that, or check out the recent episode. If I find it really quick, it was episode 76, Route of Don Quixote Bike Tour. Compelling title as usual. Anyway, over on YouTube, I've got a channel called Learn Spanish with Daniel, where you can listen to every episode of this podcast, as well as see my travel videos from around Spain, and occasionally I even teach some Spanish. I guess I should get back to teaching Spanish on there if I want to continue calling it Learn Spanish with Daniel. Anyway, there's lots of stuff up there. The blog expatmadrid.com has a lot of articles about life in Spain, mostly Madrid and Barcelona, but occasionally I go somewhere else and talk about that. Head over to expatmadrid.com/donate and you can donate some money to the cause here. This podcast is free, of course, but it helps to receive some donations. I will use the money to buy coffee and sparkling water, maybe some sort of protein to feed my starving muscles here after a workout. That's expatmadrid.com/donate. You can donate whatever amount you want, starting from €3, I believe, up to as much money as you feel like parting with. I appreciate every bit. Thanks today to Bob, who donated this very morning, and not for the first time. I believe I've received a couple of other donations from Bob in the past. Thanks, Bob. If you have any questions you would like me to answer on the podcast or topics you would like me to cover, the donation page will also allow you to send me a message along with your donation. Once again, that's expatmadrid.com/donate. Last night there was some breaking news about how George Clooney is now asking for Biden to step aside and let someone less senile have the nuclear codes. I guess old Clooners gets to write op-eds in the New York Times whenever he wants. I am certainly not the only American who would love to have two totally different candidates this upcoming election season, but we have to vote for the candidates we've got. If you're a US person living abroad, go to votefromabroad.org to order your overseas ballot if you haven't already. I'm obviously not getting paid to promote votefromabroad.org, but I do think it is important that people vote if they can. And if you are an American living overseas, you can, at least in the presidential elections. Americans overseas have some specific problems with the IRS being completely out of its mind, for example, that people in Washington may take a bit more seriously if more people decide to vote from abroad. I don't know. No promises there. They could completely ignore us forever, but either way, I don't think that not voting is a better solution than voting. So there's my highly political rant of the day. History is full of examples of people who think they're the good guys, but actually turn out to be the bad guys. Back to those anti-tourism protesters I mentioned at the beginning. If you are tempted to harass people on the streets because of their appearance when those people have done absolutely nothing to you, you just may be one of the bad guys. Hate to break it to you this way. Read a book. That's all I've got for today. I hope you have a great day wherever you are in the world. Until next time, from beautiful Barcelona, hasta la próxima.